All right, that's enough of that. Wow, there's 3 more minutes of it. Okay, for 5 points, what BOF is this? Yay! If you're not here for banana, you might be in the wrong room. So let's see, we can, how do you take that thing? There we go, exit full screen. There's even a thing that says exit full screen. Okay, so this is the banana BOF, bandwidth aggregation for network access. I'm Brian Trammell, this is Margaret Cullen, we're your chairs. Somebody's still playing banana. This is the shiny new IETF Notewell. It's basically the same as the old IETF Notewell, except for the RFC number has changed. The RFC number changing is an indication that there's different content there. If you have not read 8179, since it was updated, I think it was since Chicago, right? Then please go read that. There are actual substantive differences between the old IPR policy and the new IPR policy, so please go have a look at that. So we have a pretty simple agenda today. We're here to form a working group, so we're going to form a working group. We're going through the Notewell intro and minion song right now. After we get through that, Margaret's going to take us through a quick review of the charter text. And then I thought we'd do something slightly different. We're going to have a charter discussion with a group editing session of the charter text in Google Docs. So we sent out the link to the Google Doc so you can have a look at it in view mode to the list about a week ago. We're going to use that same document. So if you'd like to follow along without looking up here, you can do so. And we're basically, the idea is to go through like the open issues that we still have with this charter and you know, try and hammer them out on the text. Then we're going to look at the questions on formation of the working group. We're going to ask those, and then we'll have 5 minutes at the end for Suresh to you know, give the gladiator I suppose. So there were a couple of requests for time on this agenda. I do think we need all the time here to go through the charter text and to actually get really into the details of it. So we've booked a side meeting in the Tirolka room on the mezzanine level for presentations on banana related topics. So the idea there is to go have a look at, so there's a couple of presentations on basically implementations of banana or banana-like things, to look at those and discuss them and see how those could feed into future work in a banana working group.
There was also a very interesting testing presentation doing some performance testing of different categories of solutions.
Right. We had a look at those, and neither of those actually were going to inform the discussion about chartering. So if it's not going to change anybody's mind about what happens here, then maybe, thank you. Come back up. There we go. Then it doesn't really fit on this agenda. We have 3 questions that we're going to ask at the end. Please have a look at these and keep them in your mind for the discussion as it goes on. Is the charter text clear? Is it understandable? Does it describe a problem and a solution space to be worked on in the IETF? And is there interest among people here to work on it in a new banana working group? So those are the 3 questions we're going to ask for Hums later. But do have those in mind as we're going through the charter editing today. So with that, I'll give it to Margaret for a quick review of where we are in the charter, which is there we go.
So I'll start with a little history of the banana effort. Many of you already know this because you've been involved in it or were at our previous informational BOF, but we've been working on this for about 2.5 years at this point in a series of bar BOFs and BOFs. We had an informational BOF at IETF 97 in Seoul. There was lots of interest there, but the problem was not clear enough. It was not clearly formulated enough for everyone to understand what the problem was. And so we worked on that on the mailing list after Seoul, and we got to the point where, at least on the mailing list, there was consensus that we had a solid problem statement. We went into Chicago, where we held a bar-off with about 30 people from about 13 different companies present, where we actively edited the charter in a group session and got to a point where we had a charter that we were pretty comfortable with as a group. And that is the text that's being discussed here. It hasn't, I think some grammatical errors and spelling were corrected somewhere along the way, but it's basically the exact text we had at the end of that meeting. And you can find it up here on this Google Doc, okay? And the Google Doc's also in the agenda on the, meeting agenda. So you can get in the Google Doc yourself, and that way you can page up and down in the charter as you see fit while we edit it. But I'm going to go through the charter. How many people here have read the proposed charter at this point? Okay, so for the people who haven't, I'm going to go through the charter and just discuss briefly what we're proposing, and then we'll start editing. So charter starts with the usual summary part. It says that the Bandwidth Aggregation for Network Access, Banana Working Group, is chartered to develop solutions to support dynamic path selection on a per packet basis in networks that have more than one point of attachment to the internet. Okay, most of our discussion is focused on like home, small office networks where you have more than one point of attachment to the internet. Bandwidth aggregation consists of splitting local traffic across multiple internet links on a per packet basis, including the ability to split a single flow across multiple links when necessary. And that's what makes the specific banana problem, is the desire to split a single flow, like a large video, a download, or a large upload across multiple links, when that will actually result in better performance for the end user. Next. We have a little goals section in the charter. It says it's the goal of this working group to produce a bandwidth aggregation solution that will provide 3 benefits. Higher per flow bandwidth. So many internet links to homes and small offices like DSL or cable or LTE or satellite have relatively low bandwidth, and users may wish to run applications such as streaming video, etc., that could benefit from or require, in order to get the quality that they want, more bandwidth for a single traffic flow than is available on any of those individual links. So a bandwidth aggregation solution could supply the needed bandwidth by splitting a single traffic flow across multiple internet links, and with the implied recombining it in some way on the other side. And we'll get into that a little bit when we talk about the solutions. We want to have reduced cost. Traffic sharing on a per packet basis allows the full bandwidth of the lowest cost link to be used first, and then only use higher cost link when the lowest cost link is full. So if you had a low bandwidth, low cost link, you could use that bandwidth and then use some of your higher bandwidth, higher cost link to get your total bandwidth, rather than having to do it all on the higher cost link. We want increased reliability. When one internet link goes down, ongoing application flows can be moved to another link, preventing service disruption. So if either one of them is up, you get some level of internet service because there's the failover. Next slide. We talk in here about a generic, idea of a solution. There are some multiple proposed solutions to this problem. They have similarities and differences. So the proposed banana solutions use different approaches, tunnels, proxies, etc., to split and recombine traffic, but at an abstract level, they involve a local hardware or software component on the multi-access network and a remote component within the internet, and the mechanisms for those and this group will work on the mechanisms for those to find each other, exchange signaling information, and direct traffic to each other. We refer to those functional components as the local and remote banana boxes, specifically using generic words because we don't know if they are proxy endpoints or tunnel endpoints or what, or at least we're not trying to constrain ourselves to one or the other. And we refer to the method they use to direct traffic to each other as banana encapsulation. In the case of a tunnel, it might be an actual encapsulation. In the case of a proxy, it might be an abstract encapsulation, but there's some process they go through so that the traffic can be recombined on the other side. If you have a very clarifying question, that's okay. If it's a substantive question, we're going to move it to the discussion.
I think it's clarifying. I just want to be confirm what I think you just said, which is you are not requiring either end of a banana segment to be a transport or security endpoint. Could be in the middle, could be at the end. Is that true?
I mean, most of the scenarios we've talked about are cases in a home or small office where the local end is probably CPE, because on most of these multi-access networks, the bottleneck links are the ones that are closest to the home. And so you've got the CPE, and then you have something remote. It may be another CPE on the other end. It may be, depending, different solutions have different ways of doing this. It may be a proxy box in the middle. It may be something in the operator's network that is recombining the traffic. There are different ways that people are doing this today. We're in a situation where there are multiple proprietary methods for doing this. And there are also some sort of proposed methods for doing this that haven't actually been deployed yet. So there are several different ways that people look at to do this. But it also could be that the banana box is software running on your phone or software running on your PC. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in a network element like a router or something on the operator network. Does that make sense?
Yes. I don't know if it would be useful to clarify that you're not requiring it to be an endpoint in the connection in the charter or not, but you certainly cleared up my question.
Okay, we tried to make that clear, and we'll have to just tag this, Brian, if we can. We tried to make that clear by talking about that a banana box could be hardware or software component on the network, but let's see if we can come up with a little better wording that makes that clearer. I was thinking you'd edit you switched to the.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, I mean,
okay.
you want me to comment on the charter? I'm commenting on the
No,
charter.
that's good. I thought you were still on my slide. I have a sort of constrained visual here.
Right, yeah. No, we're over on Eastman.
So we listed some work items that will help us to reach our goals. The Banana Working Group will have the following work items. We will determine how local and remote banana boxes find each other, which there are these different levels, different parts of a banana system, and it may be that even if there are two different encapsulations, there's a unified way that they find each other. That's, has yet to be sort of worked out. So we determine how they find each other. We specify a signaling protocol that can be used to send configuration and control information between banana boxes, including IP prefixes of the local links. Information about link properties and status. Is the link, what is the bandwidth of the link? What is the current loss of the link? Whatever link properties and status we think are pertinent. Information and whatever other information is needed by the encapsulations in order to make the banana connection. We're going to select and extend, if necessary, an existing tunnel encapsulation for sending traffic between banana boxes. And we're going to work with other IETF working groups in defining banana encapsulations, if any, to ensure that discovery mechanisms and signaling protocols will meet their needs. Because there's also discussion of the possibility of an MPTCP-based banana solution, for instance, and that might be done in, say, the MPTCP working group, and we would work with them to make sure that the other layers of the banana solution would meet their needs. Next slide. There are a couple additional lines in the charter. Banana boxes will determine if a specific flow is eligible for bandwidth aggregation. If the flow is not eligible, it will not be split across multiple attached links. This is important both for certain types of performance requirements, but also because in some areas there are legislative requirements regarding the TV always has to go over the DSL or something like that. And so we don't want to, we want to be able to support those requirements, but also if there's an upper layer or a transport layer like QUIC that ends up, they already write their own way of doing this, we might want to detect, or if it's MPTCP, we might not want to have two layers trying to do the balancing. So we'll determine if it's eligible based on policy, and we will not split flows that are not eligible. And for this initial charter, we will focus on how local banana boxes communicate with remote banana boxes. We will not address the cooperation between local banana boxes. Okay, so local banana boxes will not be like, we won't do something where one local banana box passes data to another local banana box to send it. We will be focusing on the local to remote communication. So that's it for what we have for a charter right now. And if we go to the next slide. Our plan today is to discuss issues that are raised with this charter. This text was posted right after the last IETF, and there's been discussion of it being, you know, useful or good, or whether the problem statement's clear enough and stuff, but there was one explicit edit suggested to the charter. So we'll start the discussion off with this one. Is Dave here? Dave Dolson? No. Okay, well, we'll discuss it anyway because he sent it to the list. There was a general issue. Should we mention ECN in the charter? ECN being explicit congestion notification. If so, what should we say about it? And Dave Dolson proposed that we add an additional work item that says specify measurements, protocols, and control algorithm for the scheduling of packets into each link based on packet loss and ECN experience per link. Okay? Miria wrote back and said she didn't entirely agree with that as a work item. I mean, she's here, so I'll let her speak first, Al.
Mia Kuhlevin, yeah, I replied just a half an hour ago, whatever, on the mailing list. And there are different components here, and I think the point, and now I cannot read it anymore. So it says measurements, protocols, and control algorithms. I think protocols is covered by the charter because that's what this is about, signaling protocols. Measurements might or might not go into this working group, but at least there are other working groups working on measurements. And for control algorithms, at least I don't think we need to, there's the urgent need to specify control algorithms because it's like you don't need for interoperability like one single control algorithm to be used. So this topic might be a little more researchy and you actually want to leave some open space for experimentation there. The one thing that we could mention in the charter is ECN in general, to use ECN for feedback. And now you can actually go to the charter. And this already mentions, as Dave said in his email, and now you scroll up again, please. You were right at the right place where I wanted to be. Information, there's one point about information about link properties and status. So that was mentioned to cover loss and ECN, so you can explicitly mention ECN there if you want to, but I think it's included anyway.
I think of it as already covered by the charter, but because it was raised, obviously that's not obvious to everyone. And I certainly wouldn't object to saying including ECN at the end of that line, because we definitely should be communicating ECN information and compatible with ECN mechanisms. I'm not sure that I think we would necessarily be the right people to talk about how you do measurements to determine congestion exists or things like that. That seems like that's the subject of other groups, but I don't know. Suresh?
Yeah, Suresh Krishnan. So I think what Dave suggested was using loss and congestion experience specifically, right? Like, so he didn't say ECN, but like, it was a bit more generic, like, so leaving the stuff open for other things, but I think it's fine.
Tommy Polly, Apple. I was just going to say it should also be generic. It feels, in the context of this, we're being very generic about not getting to protocols like MPTCP and stuff. And so consistent with that, just say that you want to deal with congestion on the network. Don't go into ECN.
Right, because the mechanisms might be different at different, like MPTCB already does deal with congestion on, yeah.
Julius Krobachuk, I've tried to follow the discussion on the list, but I'm probably missing something. I don't see any good reason why we would need to be signaling ECN explicitly. Why should we be signaling ECN capability? Just mark the packets and they will either get dropped or marked.
So we're talking about a tunnel here, and if you have control about both endpoints, you don't have to negotiate it, you can just use it. Yeah. If you have control about both endpoints, you don't need a negotiation or anything, you can just use it. You can just mark your packets, but you need the feedback. You need to know which packets have been marked. Yeah. We didn't say that. We didn't say that. We're just talking about the marking and the feedback.
The banana signaling protocol.
On the mic, please.
Including ECN.
Can you,
Mike,
yeah,
please.
I can't hear you.
There's a
Julius.
microphone. Can you get on
Julius,
the microphone?
we
Julius,
can't hear you.
we can't hear you, and there are
Sure,
remote
go
people.
ahead.
No, Julius, behind.
Julius.
Yeah, give him a microphone, please.
So it has just changed in the last seconds, but it used to say that the banana signaling protocol would be used for signaling stuff, including ECN. And I don't understand why that is the right place to signal ECN, since it is signaled already in band.
So
Yeah.
the point of this edit was to essentially say we need to be explicit about in the charter. I mean, this was the suggestion that came from Dave Dolson. We need to be explicit in the charter that the link properties and status include things like ECN, which
Can you maybe just change this to say including congestion experience, and say instead including congestion feedback?
What was that last word?
Feedback.
Feedback, okay.
Yep.
Can I slightly ask a tangential question? Like, can we step back and, look at the, why we are creating this BOF, who is asking for it, before we go into such, gory details on the charter scope?
We can discuss everything about the charter. We felt that because Dave had brought his stuff on the list weeks ago, we should make sure we discussed his issue. But that was it. That was the one issue that was raised on the list. Now, hopefully people who are on the list, if they had other issues with the charter, raised them, but this is your chance. Here we go, open discussion.
That question seems to me to actually speak to the questions at the end.
Right, like, so Suresh Krishnan, so just to answer Sri, like, that's what I exactly want to find out here.
Yeah.
Is there a community to work on this? Okay, so that's not like out of scope, that's really in scope. That's what we're here for.
Yep.
Dave Allen Erickson. The item of how boxes discover each other sort of confuses me a little bit, because that strikes me as something that it cannot, discovery doesn't seem like the right word. And for example, like, I know how that's going to happen if this is a carrier managed service, because I know the tool set that's going to be used, and it's going to be a combination of what 3GPP and BBF describe. And in BBF, we've got the working text 378, and we've started work now on 5G fixed, where we're going to be working with 3GPP for that sort of scenario. Now, I understand we're discussing a scenario where this is not managed by the people who are necessarily providing the access links. That's just simply an underlay.
Right, I mean,
but
it could be, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, the solution won't be designed with the assumption that both links are operated by the same operator.
Yeah, I'm assuming this is where they're not operated by the same operator, which means there has to be some other means of provisioning this as a service done as an overlay. So I'm not quite, the word discovery just escapes me.
Well, I
To
mean, maybe
describe this
discovery is
thing.
the wrong word, but I mean, what things commonly used for this sort of thing are neighbor discovery packets, DHCP, DNS lookups. I mean, it depends, we haven't specified
So,
a particular one, but what word would you use for more, to be more generic for that? To find each other? To
so it's.
be provisioned?
Provision
Yeah,
strikes me as a
yeah,
little closer
provisioning,
to
I
the way
think,
this
is
is
the
actually
word that you're
going
trying to get to. Yeah. So,
Yeah, no objection for me. Provisioning is fine. Provisioning
it-
information, something like that.
does that make you happier? So this edit here?
Actually, I think you've got it in a couple of places.
Yeah,
in
up
the text
above
Okay,
it's
yep, yep,
floated
yep.
by,
referred
so.
to as well in a bulleted list.
But-
It's the first one of the bulleted list up above.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand the use case we are discussing here, because like I said, I know how this stuff is going to happen when it's a carrier managed service. And that's not going to be done here, so.
Well, I mean, specifically, at least when it's a DSL-related carrier managed service. Right.
So Dave, question then. So you're basically saying, so for certain stacks, certainly the provisioning mechanism, so if it's a carrier managed service, then definitely provisioning is out of scope for this working group. That's pretty clear. For non-carrier managed services, you could use provisioning mechanisms defined in other SDOs, depending on sort of the deployment and business model, right? But in the cases where none of those fit, because I can certainly see some of these where none of those would fit, then that would be in scope for this working group. I might be reading into previous discussions that you and I have had off list on this, that we need to make sure that this works with and doesn't duplicate what BBF is doing in this space, which is clear.
Well, that'd be BBF and 3GPP.
And 3GPP for the mobile space, right? So,
Right.
but I
No,
think that there are
and-
some over-the-top spaces that are clearly outside the scope of those two.
Right, and if there was just something in the charter that actually indicated this, we were discussing over the top, because I don't think I saw that as this was rolling by.
I mean, maybe we want to say something that this solution will be agnostic, link type agnostic, or something
Well,
like
so there's
that.
link type agnosticism, but there's also the fact that there are provisioning mechanisms that are completely out of scope for Banana,
Yeah.
right? Where you can be running essentially Banana encapsulations.
I don't think we're going to assume 5G, right?
Right.
So I think you've dug yourself into a little bit of a hole by using the term provisioning, which
Yeah.
implies to me sort of a provider active,
Right.
like a connection setup. What I think you're trying to say here where you use the word discovery is rendezvous, right? This thing may already be set up and sitting there waiting for traffic to show up and drop in one end and then pop out the other. And so there may not be any action that needs to take place to set up the tunnel, but you want to have traffic be able to get into it. And so that,
Yeah.
to me, that's discovery.
I mean, rendezvous it was a protocol once, right? So could we say mechanisms for them to find each other? I don't know.
I would be okay with that.
It's-
That's what rendezvous means.
I know what that word means, and I just, that way it can't be confused with possible previous protocols. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a terminology. I mean, we've got, so basically we're trading off terminology rat holes at this point. So I'm writing some text here, Dave. Does this cover the other side of that? Because like, on the one hand, it's make sure that our encapsulations work in with other working group stuff. And then there's really, I think, an inter SDO thing that needs to be added here that would address this, right? Rendezvous.
Yeah, there is something that is going to have to indicate that, something may be needed for your particular use case because you're not deploying the existing mechanisms, and that's really the over-the-top case. But the piece parts need to be separable.
Yeah, yep.
I think is the key thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could also use some wording on where we list what we're going to do. As I was reading through it out loud here, I was realizing it didn't really say that the idea was to do each of those parts. So, and I tried to say that in what I was saying, but so that, two different encapsulations might use the same signaling mechanism. And that, a combination of an encapsulation and a signaling mechanism might use a specific mechanism for finding each other. And that, it wouldn't necessarily be like that they could be separable architecturally, right? I don't know if that's not clear enough in the charter. Is that what you're saying, Dave?
Well, they need to be separable. I mean, there's a lot of areas I would expect things to be common. For example, traffic distribution policy. I can't be 100% clear on that statement because in the case where I'm a carrier offering a service, I understand all the business aspects of how I would use the different accesses. I'm not quite sure how the business relationships would work if this is like an over-the-top roll you around. So there is some interesting things there probably to be explored in terms of how this works out. Because if I'm doing this as a carrier, for example, I can offer zero rated when I control the policy of how the radio side is being used, where I couldn't guarantee that was going to happen in an over-the-top scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's some interesting problems there. But yes, I would hope that we could find a high degree of commonality, but the key thing is to understand there are places where stuff will need to be substituted in.
Right.
Yep.
So this about working with other SDOs, and we can make sure that those nouns get filled in. And then the comment that the key part is separability here, that addresses this, I think. Okay, cool, thanks.
Ben Schwartz, Jigsaw. This charter uses the word link or internet link a lot. I'm not totally clear on what an internet link is, but it would be nice if software VPNs were clearly in scope.
Okay, so if software VPN, yeah, okay. So I read for this, not link as in terms of link, right? Like not a point to point. I read for this access noun, right? So yeah, so in that
One of the problems
case,
with this charter is every noun, somebody
Right.
has a different noun they would like to use. And communication is not occur best when I say, here are my list of nouns, and you say, here are your list of nouns, right? I mean, we need to try to come up with nouns that we think communicate this well enough that we're talking about the same thing. And are you actually concerned that we're talking about a different thing than you are?
My only concern here is that link here could be interpreted to be a physical link or a physically existing network, and I want to make sure that software VPNs are regarded as in scope in the charter.
yeah, I haven't seen, like personally, Chair Hat, I haven't seen any discussion that would suggest that they're not.
We could say virtual or physical somewhere, and
But
one of the
then, yeah,
things-
but then if you say physical link, then you definitely mean something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because we
right.
don't really mean physical
Yeah,
links either,
exactly.
so, yeah, okay.
Thing that you can put your packets down and they get to the internet somehow, maybe if you're lucky.
Alan Ford. At the risk of carrying on this noun-based discussion, the next noun I was going to pick up on was encapsulation, which was bugging me a little bit.
Yeah, it bugs me a little bit too. Come up with a better one.
Protocol.
What?
Because the thing about encapsulation that annoys me was the first thing that made me think of was overhead. And you don't necessarily, depending on what the banana solution is, add any overhead. It depends what the solution is. It might have a encapsulation header, it might not.
Well, one of the things we're trying to get across here is we have a way of finding the ends.
Yeah.
We have a way of signaling stuff between the ends, and we have a way of actually sending the data between the ends. Now, if we have a signaling protocol and an encapsulation protocol, cool. If we have a signaling protocol and a protocol, that seems kind of weak.
I felt more strongly about this at the back of the queues than I do now. I think actually what it is more of a logical encapsulation, I guess, rather than...
Well, because it might be MPTCP.
Exactly. Well, this is where I'm coming from, obviously, from MPTCP. And I'm thinking, well, we don't necessarily have any encapsulation in it. It's a protocol. Exactly. It's all about... My first thought was the word encapsulation was overhead. I haven't got a strong view on a better one, but...
Is this comment, did this comment capture?
Yes.
Did I spell your name correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay,
Thank you, my
excellent.
friend. Cheers.
I was going to
Okay.
say A-L-L-E-N-U, okay, good.
Not the American way.
Right.
Thanks.
It bothers me too, because to me, it means we add another header.
Right.
But that was the word the group
Yeah.
finally agreed on, among bad choices.
Suresh Krishnan. So one thing, just getting back to Dave's point, one of the things like I told the proponents like last time around was that single provider installations are out of scope in this, right? Like, so that is not something of interest to the IETF. So yeah, you can write it right now. Yeah, that's perfect.
No,
so like,
so
I think that would address like at least like some of the concerns that like Dave brought up, and that are specifically to address the overlap that we have with other SDOs, because a lot of them are working with like single provider scenarios where the same kind of binding takes place. So I would like to put it in somewhere explicitly in the charter. I thought I read it somewhere, but like I think it's good to just separately call it out.
Yes, I think that's good. I think we want to work out how to word it, because I don't think we want to, I mean, there are very few ways we could effectively stop a single provider from using a mechanism that works for multi-providers, right? And I don't think we want to do that. But what we're trying to do is something that would work when they are not the same provider.
Exactly.
And then, of course, a single provider can pretend to be two separate ends if they want to.
Right, the single provider is degenerate case of the other thing, but I just want to make sure that like, oh, like I know this thing because like I have a pre-shared key between these things, kind of things don't happen.
Suresh, are you happy with this text? I mean, we can make sure that the box is drawn more tightly around the scope, but
So Gary Fairhurst, I'm still stuck with the provisioning thing.
Okay.
Rendezvous, I understand. Provisioning to me means interacting in the management plane to make things happen, which is, it seems to be exactly the opposite of what you want to do, but am I wrong or right?
Okay, I mean, there are two, let's say we are looking at two different things, all right? Let's just, there are other solution proposals, okay? But most of them are like tunneling, or they're like MPTCP, okay? If you're like tunneling, what you want to do is find the other tunnel endpoint.
Sounds
If you're
rendezvous.
like MPTCP, you use DNS and you go to talk to somebody.
Also rendezvous.
Or maybe you're using an MPTCP carrier proxy in the middle, and what you actually need to do is be provisioned with that carrier box's addresses so that you can actually use that proxy. I mean,
Sounds configured to me.
configured, that's a good
Provision
word.
is different to configured.
Configuring is fine.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just
Does
checking I understand.
DHCP provision things or does it configure things? I know it has the word configure in it,
It's
but we
not-
now refer to it as provisioning things. So,
Wow. Okay. And the other one was just a suggestion that might help, but why don't we include, would it be acceptable to include tunnel in the list of technologies where we have satellite and other things? And then we kind of get the VPN thing in there. We have a list of technologies for what a
yeah,
link
we
is.
say, well, somewhere we
don't say
list,
tunnel
way
there.
up at the top, near the top, we list, oh, here, DSL, cable, LTE, satellite,
It
et
does say
cetera.
tunnels,
We
you
could
see?
say
Choose different approaches to use
VPNs, et
tunnels.
cetera, or tunnels, et cetera, or
No,
something.
it says it on the next line down, that was as well. It says tunnels and proxies, so that means that the VPN thing was in scope.
No, actually, tunnels and proxies are like example solution types. Yeah, but if we
You
do
get
it
it.
there, that's good. I like that. And that VPN guy, does that work for you? I forget who brought up that issue. We had, okay.
Marko Szachowski, NCSC. Would it help if the working group had a charter item to produce an additional work item that defines or describes the various use cases where Banana could apply and the various restrictions that might apply to those? For example, the one you mentioned earlier about the legislative requirement to carry TV over DSL only.
I wouldn't personally object to that if Suresh wants it, as long as he doesn't make doing the other work dependent on doing it first. Because working groups die. They spend 2 years figuring out what their use cases are, and everybody is gone. And I've already done that twice, and I'm not doing it again.
Chen Sanxiong, two questions for clarification. One is whether there's another box between the local box and the remote box. For example, net. If there's a net, then the IP application in local link may be changed by the net. Then if the local box provides this information is useless because it's changed by net. So one concern. The second concern.
Yeah, let me capture that one first, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
will give you time to use
Yeah.
second one. is it enough that we're going to have to do middle box considerations for this? I'm looking at you because you're a transport person. I could be looking at Miria. Or do we need to explicitly say something about middle boxes? I mean, we'll have to do middle box considerations
I
for
don't
it, right?
care-
Obviously,
I
because
don't
it's a,
care the box, but I said the IP prefix at local link. But I think if located between this box, then this IP prefix information in local link is useless. This is my concern.
you're saying that what the node thinks the prefix local link
Can
is
you
might
go
not
down,
be.
can go up
So-
a little? Yeah.
So you're thinking there could be a NAT
Yeah.
outside the
Yeah,
CPE,
up.
right?
Up.
This is what I'm trying to, okay.
Yeah, IP prefix of local links.
There's a CPE, and he knows the IP prefix of his local links.
Yes.
Okay? You're thinking north of him, there may be a NAT,
Yes.
and that he would have to then, now I'm concerned that if north of him there's a NAT, he no longer really has visibility
Yes.
of local links, or you just think it would be on one side?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
multiple NATs,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, this is my concern.
And I'm not sure how that affects it, because I think it depends a lot on what the solution is. Setting up a tunnel from end to end, a tunnel traffic would just go through a NAT like the normal way. I mean, it's an IP header, right? But I don't know what, I mean, if it's going to somehow get unnatted before it gets to the other end, right? I don't know.
Yeah, this is my concern. Yeah. The second concern, if communication end to end, I want to know whether the end to end host involved or no these two boxes involved in the communication. This means whether we need some change from the two sides or these two boxes are totally transparent to communication hosts.
Okay, I missed an important word there.
This means we do not to change it to anything of the communication endpoint. It's a not or no from my side.
Well, in some cases, this may run on an endpoint. So I'm not sure we can say we'd never change anything on the endpoints, but the idea, I mean, most of the solutions are looking at running on CPE and the end nodes would not change. But it doesn't have to be that way. It could be on an endpoint.
For my side, if solution needed to change, for example, my mobile phone, it's very hard to deploy these solutions. That's my concern. Yeah.
Hi, Dave Senegrove. I'm the Broadband Forum Liaison Manager. I've got a concern with the existing charter in that it's not particularly clear about the scope and where we draw the line between what's happening here and what's happening in the Broadband Forum. The text that was added as a result of Suresh's comments and Dave's comments went part of the way. But at one point, I remember there was some text in the charter, or one of the draft charters, that made it explicit that the solution being pursued here was for multi-provider. And that was a nice, easy way to delineate what's going on here versus what's going on in the Broadband Forum.
Right, that's what.
That text seems to have disappeared.
Well, the charter got started all over again
Okay.
after
For
the informational.
whatever reason.
You're like talking about the one from the informational off, yeah.
I would like to have that delineation because it made it very clear and it was easy to handle the relationship between two organizations by saying that what's happening here is for a multi-provider solution. Bandwidth.
I mean, there's nothing to stop it from being used as a single provider solution,
Right.
but the point is to do something that will work in a
That's
multi-provider
harder to
solution.
explain.
So-
If what is written is that this is a multi-provider solution, and then if somebody wants to on their own take it and use it as a single provider solution, they're free to do that. But if it's characterized as multi-provider, it's very easy to say, this is where that work is done, single provider, go to the broadband.
Well, if
so-
you use
Like I
the
said,
links,
Margaret,
if
just a second.
somebody wants to take the multi-provider solution and use it internally as a single provider, they're free to do that. But at least the characterization and the solution is very clear.
So can I ask a clarifying question on your question? When you talk about single provider versus multi-provider, so when I think of single provider, I think of provisioning, configuration, whatever we're going to call that, and all of the links involved are all provided by a single provider, right? So there's probably even a single contract that runs under. It's like here's my internet, right?
Yeah, I think it
So
would
I
probably,
think that the important part of this is not that the various links that are being bonded together all come from the same provider.
Right.
I think the important part is that I actually think the important part is that it's some subset, usually all of the links, and the configuration and provisioning are coming from the same provider.
Yes.
So the clarification would be, so if I want to go and buy 3 links from the same business,
Right.
and go have somebody else do the provisioning because maybe there's some value add they can do with overlay networks or something, then that seems like it's in scope here because because the provisioning and configuration is now going to be above the layer that BBF operates at.
See, I would have seen it the other way around. If there's a
Okay.
business relationship between a number of operators,
Right.
so that it virtually looks like a single operator, I would have put that on the other side.
So,
Well, what about the MPTCP proxy case? What if I write an MPTCP proxy and Painless Security goes into a weird business for us, since we don't do that, offering a service to people to aggregate their traffic over their multiple links? I'm one provider, but I'm not the same provider who's providing the links or who's provisioning their nodes on the lowest level. And so I don't fit into the BBF.
Then we need a
But I'm a
very
single
clear way to
provider.
explain how this
Right.
divides.
And that's the tricky part is like, when your links are provided by the
Maybe-
same provider, could we say
Perhaps
that?
we do this in terms of business relationship.
So I think
IETF
that-
doesn't do business relationships, right?
Which
So
is why we
can't-
chose to put this in terms of operators, so.
Yeah,
we
I
either
think-
work with what we've got or we expand with how we describe.
I think the technical sort of way to split these up is the configuration and provisioning done by somebody who actually has access to the links in terms of like the actual links, not the access links, but the actual link.
Yeah, and if I was to elaborate on just a little bit, excuse me for stepping in the line. Yes, I have.
No.
Oh, yes.
What's your name?
Dave Allen. Thanks. Okay, I think that the point is that the tool set also changes. For example, DHCP was mentioned, but unless the banana box behind a residential gateway is dealing with a different DHCP server than the residential gateway, then it gets a little weird. So the tool set that's available in the over-the-top case is going to be different for bootstrapping this thing. And you need to be cognizant of that.
Right, I mean, the provisioning method in my theoretical case might be that I ship you a box that knows the DNS name of my giant MPTCP proxy in the sky, right? I mean, it may not be using any protocol.
Okay, I think Brian's capturing the essence.
Yeah, so this is going to be difficult text to write, so I don't want to spend the rest of the time doing it, but I think that, this is where we want to get, right? Okay, cool. Thank you.
Tommy Pauly, one thing just on this point as a thought, maybe rather than, I'm not sure if this would help, rather than saying single or multiple, change it to say that something like non-specific, like this is going to be not specific to a provider, because that can include being within one provider without taking advantage of single provider extra stuff.
Right, yeah. That's what I was saying with
Gives you the
also
flexibility.
about the link types, right?
Right.
Another difference between us and something done in somebody who's going to be the single provider case is we're going to be agnostic to link types, but we also may be agnostic to whether various things are provided by the same or different providers.
Right. And then the real reason I came up here was back on the encapsulation thing, because I also find protocol problematic, and maybe this is too overloaded, but it kind of feels like it's more, rather than a banana encapsulation or a banana protocol, it's like a banana transport. And the good side of that is that there's a great images of banana
That's what I
transports.
wrote, and then the
Okay.
transport area was like,
Is there another word
That's
for
how we
transport?
got
Because it's a
encapsulation.
thing, it's literally a thing that transports.
their heads actually spun around. It was not pretty.
Why? Or no, because it's not necessarily encapsulation. Like
There's a
because-
banana area director too behind you in line. Oh wait, sorry, transport area director too behind you in line.
Or, I mean, I think something that means something more like that rather than encapsulation, because encapsulation implies some extra layer. And this really just means well, it has the connotation.
How about banana Data
How about
layer.
banana peel?
Banana. Data layer. No? Oh, no, data layer is already used for something too. We don't have any words that aren't used is the problem. Suresh?
Suresh Krishnan, so maybe we can find a check word for it, like, and use it. But, so the thing I wanted to say is, like, I think this, like, single provider, multi-provider probably needs, it's an area of improvement in the charter. So, like, note it down as such, and we can probably iterate on it after. But I wanted to specifically come here to talk about the use case and scenario stuff. So I don't mind if you want to work on it, but I don't want to see a publication request for it for an RFC. Like, from all the pushback, like, we have kind of given back on the support documents, like, I don't want to see that published as a standalone RFC. So as long as the working group understands that and people are willing to put that effort in, I'm really happy.
I have a presentation to start from, and I could make it not a PowerPoint presentation, and we could put it up on a wiki page, and we could bash at it.
Or you can keep it in a
And,
draft, even
you know,
adopt it in the working group, but, like, don't.
Or I could make it a Google Doc, and we could all edit the pictures. I don't care. I mean,
Sounds good. That's
it's just, the thing is, I don't want to go through the 2-year process of that, because then, by then you haven't produced anything useful.
I understand. So as long as it's like something for guiding, like, the work here, I'm okay. But it's something, I just want to set the expectations, because there's some people expect this to be published and work on it, and they're, like, surprised that, like, this is not something that's going to be published as an RFC. So as long as that expectation is clear, I'm fine putting it in
And
there.
then for people who don't know, the presentation I just referred to was uploaded into the meeting materials for this meeting, even though it was from IETF 97 as background information. So if you want to see it, it's there.
Just wanted to, Spencer Dawkins, Transport Area Director, and I just wanted to support what Suresh was saying. If a use case document turned into a 18-month exercise, I would have to review it.
And I would make it really, really long.
Suresh, does this capture this? I think this captures it. I took that back out of the list for sending it up to, yeah.
Dr. Montenegro, I have a question, a clarifying question here. Are you explicitly disallowing or not, or not contemplating the case in which the banana endpoint is a regular client? Do you want it to be a CPE? Because a client, that could be a way to do incremental deployment. So I'm just wondering if that's part of the charter, or do you want
I think
explicitly?
it will often be like a CPE for incremental deployment, but no, we do not want to rule out when it could be software running on your PC or your phone or your endpoint. Because hopefully it gets to that eventually, right? Like, if we all ran MPPCP, the middle might go away, and that would be awesome, okay? We don't want to, we don't want to rule that out, because it's an elegant evolution.
It might be the way to get incremental deployment, end-to-end principle and all that.
But there probably will be middle boxes at first, because at last I heard it takes 8 years to change the hosts or something like that, so.
I don't know. I think that's very debatable, actually. So it might actually come first in the clients. CPEs, you have to deploy them, you have to get, operators, it takes forever.
Mia Kühlewind, as individual contributor, I'm not sure if the endpoint should be included here. I mean, like, you might, just because you have the software installed on your system and do it, but, like, if you actually want to run it on an endpoint, you can probably do better than that, because then you have actually control about how much data you send and so on. So that might actually not be the best solution. So I think.
Well, at least one of the solutions proposed for this at the informational BOF involved one end being on a cell phone, because the cell phone has 2 links. So I don't know that we want to rule that out of scope.
So I would point out that right now, like, if you essentially have a virtual banana box and you end up on a network with a non-virtual banana box, that the thing that I just highlighted here rules that out of scope. And I'm wondering if we want to actually cut that highlighted line of text, right? So I have a banana box on my cell phone. I roam onto a network where I have another banana box. Things just got broken.
Well, actually, I think that the part where we say we determine if traffic is eligible for banana, that banana traffic would not be eligible for re-bananaing in any solution that I have understood so far.
Right. But in order to make sure you don't double banana your traffic, you need to address the topic of cooperation between multiple local banana boxes.
And now we have verbs that we could argue about. Yeah, I mean, but you do have to, well, you have to have cooperation, or you have to have a way of identifying previously banana traffic and ruling it and tagging it as not bananable.
All right, so as I'm too lazy to get up and get in line, so I'm going to take my chair hat off and I'm going to say, as an individual who wasn't in Chicago, can you explain to me why this highlighted line of text is there and why we can't just cut it out?
Somebody felt that was really important. It was not me, and so
Okay.
no. Does anyone here object to cutting out this line?
So
Anybody object to removing the blue line?
I'm wondering if that is actually completely separate protocol. I'm not sure if it's the same
Yeah.
signaling protocol you use between the local and remote or between two different remotes. And if it's a completely separate protocol, you don't have to connect it. You can do it at a later point. You can figure out, and I mean, like, you might not even, for both of the protocols, you might not design a new protocol. You might take an existing protocol and extend it, and it might be two different existing protocols.
Yeah, but removing this line doesn't make us have a work item to do anything for local boxes to talk to each other. It just says that if the mechanism is they're signaling so that a further banana box would know not to split it.
I'm not objecting to removing it, but I think it's good to maybe focus on the local to remote first.
Right, yeah, well, but so we still say that, and after Julius and Phil, I'm cutting the lines, because we're out of time on this, so the two of you can
The
figure out. who
standing
gets to go
people can
first.
talk.
So I'm sorry, because we got somehow
Yeah.
to a different point than I
Yeah.
originally was
Okay.
making. So I just wanted, if you want to use this on an endpoint, and you can basically use MPTCP out of the box, you don't need any banana here. And that's why I don't think we need it for endpoints, but anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there are better ways to do it from an endpoint myself, but.
Philip Eardley, on the bit you were just cutting out, I mean, I have no idea what it was intended to mean, but my guess would be if you come along to an area where there's a choice of local banana boxes that you might use, and this is something to do with kind of negotiating between these boxes about which one of them you're going to choose and saying that's Zetloscope. That would be my guess. What
Yeah.
that was meant to mean.
Yeah.
Julius Krobacek. So I remember why this line was added, and it was added because everyone hates me, and I support removing it.
Okay, excellent. I think, I don't hate you, Julius.
Okay, so the lines are closed? Oh, but, okay, yeah.
I have one comment regarding to the IP prefix. Yeah, I think the local links is not accurate. I think it should be the links in between the two banana box rather than local links between the banana box and the host. What do you think?
I think the word local is there, and it should be network in the context of the rest of this, but now I'm afraid someone's going to get up about the network links thing again. But I think to be consistent with the rest of the charter, it should refer to it as network links. And that is.
Access
just-
links.
Access links, excellent. But that's what it means, is
Yeah.
the outbound
Yep,
links,
Yep,
not
the
the.
outbound,
Yeah.
yep. Is that,
Access link means the between the host and the banana box.
we're not talking about the internal network here, we're talking about on the other side of the, on the
No,
other
the-
side of the
the-
northbound side.
The links to the internet.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
This is Alex Petrescu. So
We cut the lines like a little while ago.
email, okay.
Yeah, email. So, compass
So
directions.
you want to come up here.
Huh?
You're going to ask questions, right?
I'm gonna ask questions, I'm gonna ask questions
Okay.
from down here.
Excellent.
That's why I'm down here. All right, so we have banged on the charter for a little bit. To be clear, we're going to be asking the questions on the charter as it stands now with the idealization of the edits. There's a couple of places where we have comments that say, where everybody who wrote the comments, we have said, it's clear that there's a resolution here, we just don't want to wordsmith here. Are there any other clarifications that we need to make right now that would switch somebody from a no on this first question to a yes? Is the charter text clear and understandable? Like if you're prepared to say, yeah, I understand this, but there's just this one thing that is a problem for me, please come up now. All right. Oh.
Praveen Moy, Nokia. What is not clear is the use case. What you guys are saying, that if it is a multi-provider and you are saying that you are not gonna control, if you're gonna put it outside the network, then how the SLAs are gonna work, how the provisioning is gonna come into play, who's going to own the device, how this service is going to be workable actually in the real network.
Do you want to
Well,
address that question?
I don't know that I can say all the answers to that because it's different in different current solutions. When you say things like who's going to own the device, if you mean like who's going to own the property, that's kind of outside the scope, right? If you're saying, is the device going to come from a service provider or is it going to be bought by a customer at Fry's, that's different in different solutions. So I don't know how to answer those questions. This is, because if I do an MPTCP with a proxy box in the network that's offered as a service, presumably they're going to send me a box, I'm guessing, all right? Or they're going to send me some software to run on my server, or they're going to do something else. If I'm going to do a CPE-based solution, then presumably someone is going to have to send me, I'm going to have to buy the CPE somewhere or get it from somebody, but I don't understand how to, I'm not sure how to answer who's going to own it. Because it depends what.
Well, on what basis actually the service will be turned on, I think, right? Because if you're going to say that, let's say MPTCP is the way to go, then at least there is somewhere someone is going to say that MPTCP is provisioned in that particular box or it is capable of MPTCP, right? So similarly, how this whole provisioning model, what you guys are talking about so far, how it comes into picture, I think that explanation is more important, because otherwise we are talking about a service which is in the network. You also talked about, oh, I will do a DNS discovery. Then there are issues about, let's say, if I have a firewall in the middle, then who is going to take the ownership of ensuring that even though the signaling goes through, the service is actually turned on. So there are all those issues what we need to address before we say that the service is turned on, right?
At least for some people, I think they're going to load open source on their home router. But for end user customers, somebody has to offer a business service that is not usually captured in an IETF draft.
I think this is, but I think that the technical sides of this are actually covered by this first deliverable, right? Like, so the working group draft for the provisioning and configuration mechanism has to talk about the context in which it operates.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wim Hendricks, Nokia as well. I have one clarification question. Is today it seems that the charter is very much focused on internet use cases, right? So providing aggregate bandwidth for internet application. There is also this use case, which is pretty hot today, is SD-WAN, which is providing software-defined VPNs using multiple internet links or internet plus MPLS or private WANs and stuff like that. Is that also in scope of this charter or not?
In my reading, that seems like a definite no.
I didn't totally understand. Combining
SD-WAN.
VPNs?
SD-WAN. Software-defined. Yeah, so MPLS VPNs and
No, not really MPLS. They are being done over the top, so providing over the top VPNs, combining multiple internet links from multiple providers, or even private MPLS connections and stuff like that.
I mean, the answer I have for that is yes and no. I think no as a specific thing. I think that if your link were provided that way, that most of the boxes running above that wouldn't be aware that their link was provided that way.
So-
And
They are.
So that I think actually comes into the name of the working group, right? So the primary aim here is to provide bandwidth aggregation.
They have
where
the same use case. I can clarify a bit more later maybe, but the use case itself, providing bandwidth aggregation, some applications using one link or the other versus combining the two is what they are actually trying to achieve as well. So as part of this charter, you could actually offer a standardized solution for the use case like that as well.
But aren't they trying to do it at a lower level?
No.
Okay? I am not that familiar, I guess, with what they're doing, so.
For me, the important thing is whether this is in scope or not, I think, right now, because if you look to the charter, it's very much focused on residential, internet-ish based use cases, and not so much that application is what I'm talking about. So hence my question. But
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, yes, it's definitely focused on residential access use cases.
at the moment, okay. So it's not in scope.
Right.
So can I ask a few other questions on the general charter on this text?
We can't have general questions. Do you have a
No, it's
clarity of
questions
the
on the
charter?
text, yeah.
Okay.
So we're trying to get to these questions here. So please ask clarification questions that would change your answer on one of these.
I'm not following this, but what I want to ask is, why do you want to define a new encapsulation protocol? Have you evaluated, why is GRE not sufficient, or, what is the gap?
At least one of the solutions proposed uses GRE.
Okay.
One of them uses MPTCP.
Then
We're not necessarily going to define a whole new protocol at that level.
I thought one of your deliverables is a new encapsulation protocol, right? If you go down, can you slide? Scroll down. Yeah. Further down. Yeah.
In the case of the GRE one, we have some things we have to include in the GRE header and so forth, but we use GRE.
Scroll down, please. Yeah.
And
Further.
in the case of the proposed MPTCP solutions, there needs to be something that allows you to get back to what the original IP addresses were on the other side. I think it ends up being an option.
So it doesn't.
So this is the level of protocol that we're defining
So
in the cases
I think the question is actually about this down here, right?
Yeah. Why do you need a new tunnel encapsulation mechanism? I can
Because you
understand-
have to
No, hold
say,
on.
we're going to use MPTCP and this option
Is
to do this, or we're going to use GRE, and this is what we're going to put in the GRE sequence number field.
Does that fix it? Right? It's not about defining an encapsulation, it's about selecting them and showing how they're used.
It says working group draft for tunnel encapsulation.
It says working group draft for tunnel encapsulations now. Right, so the fact that there's a draft that describes the encapsulations does not necessarily mean that encapsulations are getting.
It doesn't say new.
Right.
It doesn't have to be new.
So-
You can clarify that, but it doesn't have to be new.
We actually have to cut this off at this point because we do have to get to the questions if we're going to.
But I haven't finished my questions. Right?
Well,
Kim?
I mean, if you have a lot of questions on whether or not this is clear, then say, no, you don't think it's clear.
Right. So the goal is to answer these questions, and so, okay, we've got 20 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and do 2 hums. Number 1, is the charter text clear and understandable? If you believe the charter text is clear and understandable, that you've looked at this as in the state that it is right now, and you think you know what's going on, please hum yes now. I'll borrow some TSV working group terminology and note that as a decent hum. If the charter text is unclear and or not understandable, please hum no now. Okay, that was a low murmur of definitely some unclarity, but I think there's more clarity than unclarity, pretty obviously there. Does this charter describe a problem and solution space to be worked on in the IETF? Please hum yes now. It's almost as decent to hum as the, yeah. Still in the decent area. Does it not describe a problem, or is the solution space not to be worked on in the IETF? Please hum no now. Are there people who believe that the charter is clear, who hummed yes to the first one and no to the second one? Hum now. No, okay, yeah, so it's pretty much, if you think you understand the charter, it seems like something to do here, okay. Is there interest among people here to work on it? For this, I'm not going to take names, but I would like to see some hands. Who would work on drafts or reviews or yelling at people or you know, random just the work of a working group? Who would do work in this working group? Don't stand up and raise your hand. I mean, that's not fair. Yeah, you can ask a question now.
Julius Krawczyk, you didn't mention implementation work in your list.
The what?
You didn't mention implementation work in your list.
Oh, yeah, right, yes. Okay. Yeah. Can we re-ask it with Julius's? So who would write drafts, review drafts, participate in the mailing list, implement, test, break, send PRs, so on and so forth? Can we get the hands again? Okay. I see order a dozen, approximately. Decent. It's a decent number if that's 60 fingers. Right. Yeah. No, we don't want to like, you know, we don't want to punish the innocent and forgive the guilty at this one yet.
And you did get a hum on the Jabber run.
Okay, one hum. For what? For everything.
Yeah, for everything.
Okay. Okay,
Your
so
time,
I
Suresh.
think, yeah, go Suresh. Wow,
I think there is like some kind of support to continue working on this, but I did hear some questions about clarity. So I don't want to like say everything is done right now, but I would like to work a little bit more on the clarity stuff. So I'm going to give like some kind of timeout for like people to comment on the clarity, and let's say random number 3 weeks from now. Okay.
Yeah, I think Brian and I have to get together and try to turn his notes into text, or maybe I will do that because Brian's a very busy man. And we will get some new charter text to the list that says this is what we think we ended with. And then people can have, I'd like to give at least a week for people to say, no, that wasn't what I meant at all. And then a couple weeks for more for Suresh to get any clarity questions.
You can go ahead and ask them.
So there is another additional question I want to ask. Like it kind of like it's a border case, but I want to ask it because like I asked it last time around when we had a BOF, and you feel free to answer. So how many people here feel that if this work needs to be done, it needs to be done in a separate working group? Okay, so that's the question. Is the question clear?
What is the other choice?
Other choices, like, you know, it can be done in existing working groups in the
Like
IETF.
if we think it should be done in the IETF,
Like that was a question like that came up last time around. Right?
okay, but I mean, I think, what's the other thing to ask? Are you going to give them two choices? Yes, it should be a separate working group. No, it shouldn't? Or are we then going to have a discussion of where it would be otherwise? Because, okay.
So is the question clear? Okay. So if you want this work to be done in a separate working group, like everything, all the stuff that's shown here, please hum for yes. Please hum for no. Okay, I hear a stronger yes.
Yeah, that sounds like a yes. That was, actually, it was pretty much the same decent hum that we had on the other two.
Okay, so it's like, so I just want to close the loop because like, you know, I don't want like to have two different kind of questions from the last BOF to this one. So I just want to make sure this is done. Okay.
Sorry about that.
And so what we'll do is like, you know, give Margaret and Brian some time to work on this thing. And would you like to take a week?
I think if we're going to confer, we'll do it by the end of this week, and I'll have something out. I'm going away next week, so I'll have it out before I leave Prague. But then I think we should, as you said, give a few weeks for people to either say, you totally missed my point and your clarifying change didn't clarify anything, or to raise other issues they think are unclear, and we can see where we are then.
Excellent. Okay, so so I would think like 3 or 4 weeks is like a good time for that. Okay, so just set the time when you send out that mail.
Yep.
Okay. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, when you asked that question, some corollary questions came to mind because I guess the question then is to a certain extent, where does this work live? Because some of it I can see being very clearly transport area, and some of it I can see being very clearly internet area. And in the transport area, of course, the biggest challenge is there isn't necessarily traffic that's amenable to this sort of thing, and how is that going to be dealt with? And that to me is the elephant in the room that has the industry kind of screwed around at the moment. So I'm kind of wondering how we're going to get past that. And
Dave, I'm missing your words, I'm sorry. You said in the transport area, there isn't necessarily, and then I literally couldn't hear you, so if you could just talk a little closer to the mic.
okay. To me, kind of the issue is there are aspects of this I can see belonging in the internet area, and there are aspects of this I can see where it's really transport area expertise, which is going to be a challenge because the elephant in the room is there are certain classes of traffic that exist on the internet today that aren't necessarily amenable to what we're trying to do, and that's what's giving us the challenge that is making it hard to converge on solutions in the industry. So I'm just, I think the corollary question almost could be is where does this live, or does it need to live in more than one place, or is it just going to cause simply scheduling issues when it goes forward?
Well, I'm thinking I'm going to trust Miria and Suresh to decide where it should live, but whichever place we are, we're probably going to want an advisor from the other area to work with us as well.
Makes sense.
That actually makes sense. Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, this is Dave Senekrop, the BBF Liaison Manager. So if the working group is formed, I would ask that one of the first deliverables be a liaison out to the broadband forum to make sure that they understand that the work group got formed and what the scope is.
Right.
Does the working group do that, or does, I'm not, just a
My experience,
process
the-
issue, I'm not sure who sends a liaison.
I could do it myself, like personally.
In my experience, it's the working group, but
Right,
Well,
like, so if you want to do something before a working group is formed, like, if
No.
you want me to send something saying like, okay, like IETF is considering working on this, like, like, do you want to freak out or not, right? Like, that could be something we can do as well, right? Like, before we start this.
Stuff will go to new work, right? Like, as soon as there's and they'll have the 4 weeks. But he's talking about something more specific, I think. And, I mean, I'm happy to work with Suresh
No,
on
just-
this, and
just
it
the
would
fact that
officially come from whoever
actually, I'm
things
not talking
officially
about
come
something
from.
more specific, but just something that would note that the working group is either, if you want to do it before it's formed, that's fine. Just saying that this is under consideration. If you'd rather wait till after it's formed and have the work group chairs say, here's the scope and charter and point to it, that also works. So all I'm trying to do is get open communication between the
Dave,
groups.
as soon as it goes to ISG review, it will, or IAB review, the first step of the process, there's a new work email that goes to all the other bodies that we send new work email to, and I don't know if the BBF is one of them.
No.
So, okay.
I just want to like close the loop on this because I want to wait until like, the charter discussion happens, right? Like
Right.
before like where we go, because there's still, if there's like stuff to be done in the charter, like that would decide whether like BBF would have issues with it or not,
Absolutely.
right? So I want to wait till this like 1 week period plus like 3 or 4 week period completes.
Yes.
And if I have like a working charter at the end of it, like then I will like send this out before anything is done, before
Okay.
a working group is formed or not.
Yes,
Even before it
absolutely.
goes
Yeah,
to
and I
Yeah, that's what I was
didn't mean
saying,
to try
that
to send
time
this
that we
before
send new
that.
work, that's when it should go. So they have
Sorry,
the 4 weeks to comment before we make a charter, not after there's a working group, right? I mean, I'm supporting you, I think that's a good idea, but I want to make sure your comments get in
Yeah,
to the
but-
charter, not that they're made to the working group after chartering.
No, but Margaret, there's like multiple phases, right? Like, so I'm just suggesting sending this like right after we have something that is going for internal review in the IETF. Because like the new work stuff goes out at external review. So there's like 2 phases even inside the IESG.
Gives you a couple more weeks.
Right, so.
So absolutely formulate the charter after your 4 week or 3 or 4 week period that you just mentioned. And that would be the soonest that I would expect anything to come out.
Right.
Because
And
we don't
so-
want to send them work in progress.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so like I know like Sri had concerns on this, like Praveen did and Dave did. So like make sure like, any concerns are
Exactly.
addressed before we go forward with anything.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Gabe?
Gabriel Montenegro. So yeah, I'm wondering of how these things get deployed, and there may be some policy, about how to change what traffic gets bananaed and which not, and that there's all of these implications. There's a lot of aggregation of traffic here and trust issues. So are there a lot of operations, maybe some mention of the charter about making sure ops areas looking at this and aware.
Okay, that's a good point. And one thing that happens during the review is that like the ops AD like usually like freaks out a little bit and say like, hey, like how come you didn't think of the operational things? And they say like, okay, like where are the Yang modules for this? Like where is the deployability considerations for this? And that gets added. Like, but that's like done by design. So like once we have an agreement inside a community, like our community, like the banana community, what needs to get done, I think like the next steps needs to happen. And I'm pretty sure the SEC ADs are going to like talk about some stuff, like maybe there's some privacy concerns. We haven't thought about all that, but I think that will happen just by the process. So that's about it for me. Like, does anybody have any questions on this? Like, so what we're going to do is we're going to like figure out like, you know, what the chapter is going to be and then decide like whether like we're going to go, Sri, go ahead.
10 more. We actually, no, 10.
So, Suresh, I'll be quite honest. I'm not happy the way the discussions proceeded. Maybe it's just me, but what I'm not understanding is why new signaling protocol? If the problem is you want to split traffic on two different links, sure, per packet load balancing, we haven't specified proper mechanisms. If you want to solve it at a data plane layer, it's fine. But why new signaling protocol? Why do you want to, define, all the mobility infrastructure in the form of just define a new protocol? You'll end up with the exact same semantics. Why control
Makes
protocol?
sense, what you say makes sense, right? Like, just make that point. I do understand, right? There is people who have concerns with this, right? Like, so that's why I'm saying, like, we need to iterate on the charter. Like, you raised a concern, and I understand there's a concern. So, like, let's iterate on the list. If you think it's not necessary, like, use an example. Like, for example, I would think you'll say PMIP can do this, right? And that's fine. No, I'm just saying it's fine. Like, but just make the point, right?
See, the debate should not be about PMIP, about something else. The question is, let's evaluate this on the basis of merit, right? Why a new protocol? Like, don't say.
Miriam, Mike, if you want to say something, go to the mic.
Would you like it if we said in the charter that for these items, we will use existing IETF protocols if they meet the needs or something? Because I think that's our intention. I don't think that it changes anybody's intention. I know that doesn't say that in the charter, but
when we have the deliverables listed, nowhere even there's remotely a hint that we are going to reuse the existing protocols. Then there has to be a very explicit statement that we will not define new protocols. In fact, you should put that as a statement.
No, we will define some new protocols probably.
Then there has to be discussion.
Because the solution doesn't exist.
Okay, so I don't want this to happen, this fight to happen here, okay? So I think we all agree as a principle that if there's an existing protocol that solves the needs, we should use it, okay? So put that in as like a requirement, like in there, like in the charter, and then we'll go and revisit this. So there's something for you if you say like, okay, like there's this protocol that meets these needs, then you can put that up, right? Like, so I want that to be in the charter, okay? But I don't want to discuss like whether we'll define new ones or not. Let's leave that until like, if there's a working group, the working group to do the work, right? Like we don't want to do the work here. We're just running a BOF, right? We're trying to nail down the charter. That's it. That's all we're trying to do. Verb. To reuse existing protocols if possible. That's perfect. Yeah.
Dave again. Yeah, the reusing existing protocols.
This is a mess, right? So
I would see as a component of my request that we allow piece parts to be substituted in the architecture.
Yeah. So that comment is captured in the comments over here. So what you can't see is all of this over here. So all of this mess that we're going to actually bring into the document. It's just that there was. I'm kind of doing a messy job of this because it's I'm not a trained.
That's the intention. I mean, we want to work with you guys, and hopefully you will want to use some of the parts. Maybe some of the work that you guys are doing will inform things that we could do on a different level or something. I think we really hope to continue cooperation on this. So.
And Dave, specifically because of the things on the right, like I'm not going ahead with the working group formation, right? So I'm just waiting on it for things to clear up before anything happens.
Oh yeah,
okay?
No, I understand that. It's just that the point that was being made by the previous speaker to me was a larger version of my initial request as to one of the aspects of this, that the pieces were divisible, so there was naturally things could be substituted.
Perfect, thank you. Jean-Michel?
Michel Combe. I support last comments about the reuse of existing protocols. and that may be linked to also the location of the banana boxes, because we may have two scenarios, inter-domains and intra-domains, and maybe the reuse of existing protocols may not apply.
Right. So I think one of the issues, this is a BOF that's come up a couple of times, is that there's not a single protocol or protocol stack that addresses all the scenarios that we want to address. So for those places where, so it might be, in a perfect world, we could basically reuse one protocol stack for one scenario, reuse another protocol stack for another scenario, and we define essentially a configuration data model and we go home. I don't think it's going to be that simple. But I think if we elevate reusing protocols for signaling and encapsulation a little higher in this charter, I think that, but I don't want to be in a situation where we essentially say, okay, well, we have these two scenarios and we really are interested in these scenarios, and one stack is awesome for that scenario and one stack sucks for it. And we say, okay, well, we do the one stack and go home, right? So we're going to re-encapsulate TCP and MPTCP, and everything will be super happy until somebody eats the first loss.
Yeah, I also think that there's when we start getting into we will reuse existing IETF protocols, I think that there's also a bunch of stuff out there that is existing, implemented, and deployed code, and we want to make sure that we are balancing those things, because there are solutions out there, multiple of them, that address all or parts of the space, and I think we might want to reuse some of the stuff that's out there too. So I don't know, you know what I mean? Like there's a balance there. Like there could be an existing IETF protocol that there's no open source implementation, it's not widely implemented, and it's not always the better choice than something that isn't an IETF protocol but is available and widely implemented. So
Do you have an example?
in this particular context, we have a tunneling encapsulation out there deployed to hundreds of thousands of people, you know, and it's fairly small changes to GRE. And like, I wouldn't want to say that because those small changes are a difference, that if we had some other protocol that was less well suited and would perform less well, that we're forced to use it just because the IETF defined it. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't want to run this here, right? Like I said, like look at it, and if there's something that makes sense, let's visit it at that point. But I think like Sri's point was like, you know, do a gap analysis for the things that exist, right? And I think that's a very valid point, right? So don't presuppose that we have to define something new. I think that was his request, if I paraphrase you, right, Sri? Okay, good. So I think we're all on the same page on that. Cool. Okay, sounds good. Thank you all for coming, and I have nothing else, so if the chairs have something, you can close.
anything else? Any videos?
Going once, going twice. Bye, everyone. Feel free to leave. This stuff goes on forever.